So let's get into this video. First, we'll begin by importing the Pandas library or the package. So it's going to be import Pandas as PD. Now, first question that we're going to answer is find the top 5 customers in 2015, right? So let's look at that particular data set that we have for this particular case. Now I have customer ID, their transaction amount in a yearly fashion, that is transaction amount for 2011, 12, 13, 14 and 15, and similarly how many transactions they did in that particular year, right? The next thing that I have with me in this is when did they do their first transaction and when did they do their last transaction. Now this is a summary data based on the order details of this particular retail e-commerce website. However, I just have the summary and we're just now handling the summary of this particular data. So let's move forward. So I've run the I've basically written the code to import Pandas as PD. I'm just going to run that and it's successfully going to import the Pandas package. Now I'm going to import the data set, that is the retail data customer summary.csv, right? So I'm just going to copy this one, and the basics of import goes like this, right? So I want to basically have some data called as customers, and I can equate that to PD dot read underscore CSV, right? And then within a single quotation, I will give the dataset name or the CSV file name for importing. Now, while I'm importing it, notice I've said pd.read CSV, and within quotation, I've given the .csv file for import. Now, there are some other parameters that we can do within this particular method, but we're just going to ignore all of that now, and we're going to stick to the basic one as is a comma separated file, and it's going to be easily imported with this default parameter. So moving forward, if I run this code, I should have successfully imported the customer's data. Moving forward, the first moving forward, we want to find the top 5 customers in 2015, right? So that's the first question. So obviously, if you want to basically look at the data, what you're going to do is I'm just going to say customers, right? Which will basically list all the customers that are there within that data frame, right? And if you just move towards the right hand side, what you'll see is 13 columns and the top 5 rows and the bottom 5 rows, right? So basically what you're seeing is these 5 rows, and along with it, you're basically seeing the last 5 rows also, right? And that's how basically it just dumps the data, and it's not something that is interpretable. However, now if you want to basically have an interpretable format, right, we use the .head method. Now how do we use this? We take any data frame, that is the customer's data frame, right, and we say dot, and then we say the head method on this, right, and we say open close method. And as you can see that you basically have n is equal to 5 as a parameter here, and I'm just going to leave that as a default here without any parameter because it works without it also. And if I run it, you'll see that I'll be able to see the top 5 records of this particular data. Right now, we did still answer the question of getting the top 5 customers here. We just got the top 5 rows, right? We rarely know that in this kind of situations, you'll always have the top 5 customers in the top 5 rows, right? We have to basically sort this data in such a way that you get the top 5 customers in this particular data set, right? So to get the top 5 customers, how do we do that? We basically say sort, and then you sort it by transaction amount from largest to smallest to basically get the top 5 customers, and typically these are the top 5 customers in terms of transaction amount, right? I'm just going to say Control Z and go back to the data frame that we are handling, that is the customer's data frame, and then we're going to use the sort mechanism to basically get the top 5 customers, right? So to do that, I'll basically do something like this. I'll say customers dot, right, and use the sort method, right? Now the sort has sort indexed and sort values. For now, we are going to use the sort values, which will basically help us do it on a particular column, right? So the sort column that we are going to use, the column that we are going to be sorting is the transaction amount 2015. So we can simply say tran underscore amount underscore 2015, right? So if I do that, it should basically sort the data and I should get the transaction amount on the top. But you'll notice that it's basically doing a ascending order sort, right? Which means if I had to do the ascending order sort, it will be looking something like this. I'll say transaction amount 2015 and smallest to largest, it's what we are seeing here, right? But we don't want this. We want the sort to be in the descending order. It's from largest to smallest. And if I say okay, that's the sort that we are looking for. So if I go back to the data, and if I had to do this in Pandas, I basically have to do something like this. I have a parameter called as ascending is equal to true. So by default, the ascending is equal to true. And if I want this to be in descending order, what I need to do is basically say ascending is equal to false. This way, Pandas knows, or this sort values method knows, that I need to sort this data in a descending order, right? So if I do this, it'll sort the data in descending order of 2015, the transaction amount of 2015, and I'll basically get the entire data frame like we saw in this particular place. But hey, let's layer this particular method here so that we get only the top 5 records, right? So if I say dot head, extend it with the dot head and say run, now I get the top 5 customers here, right? And if I just have to convert this into a top 10 customers, what I can do is I can just, take an argument as 10 here and then find the top 10 customers listed with the Pandas sort values and head method combination, right? So that way we basically answered the first question of finding the top 5 customers in 2015 using the head and sort method, right? So moving on to the next question, let's see the next question that we have. It's find top customers in 2014 that did not buy in 2015. So let's move on to the next question. Here's the next question that we have, right? So first, the concept that we will be doing is now selection of columns, right? Single or multiple. And then we want to basically select the columns that will help us identify or answer this particular question. So to begin with answering this question, what we're going to do is we're going to take the same code that we used earlier here, right? And I'm just going to replace this with 5. I'm just going to take this value, obviously, and I want to find the top customers in 2014. So if I just change this particular value to like 14, I'll be able to do the same thing, but I get the top 5 customers of 2014. Basically what I'm trying to do here is that if I sort the data by 2014 from largest to smallest, I basically have the top 5 customers. And then if I just have these 2 columns alone, I'll be basically able to look at this data set. So moving forward, if you go to the next problem statement here, we'll basically further enhance this. What we're going to do is we're going to store this 2014 customers, the top customers, within a particular new data frame, right? This is a place where we are basically creating another data frame, much like we have a SQL create, right? Where you are creating another table and storing whatever resultant data set you have within it, right? So here I'm going to say customers underscore 2014 as the new data frame, customers as a new data frame, which will basically store the value top 5 customers are 2014. So if I run it, you basically get the customers of 2014. But to analyze this further, what we want is to be be able to select two of the columns together so that we are able to look at it and identify the customers that did not buy in 2015. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take the customers 2014 data frame, which is now holding the top 5 customers, and now try to select those two columns that basically help you select a particular column here, right? Now obviously you want to basically select one column at a time. Let's see how that can be done, right? If I want to select just the top 5 customer IDs from this data frame, it'll be simply like customer ID, and then I'll be able to run this and get the customer IDs. However, this does not solve the problem, right? I want to basically have the two supporting columns that will help me answer that question. And if I make another list within it, right, this holds only one column right now, but then I can give a comma and then add any additional columns that I may require for this particular case, right? So in this particular case, I want transaction amount 2014, comma, transaction amount 2015 to give me a picture of who are the customers that did not buy in 2015. And like we have it within the Excel, we are now able to get those customers that did not buy in 2015. However, a little detail that we can push within Pandas is that we can group these ones that are together, right? So how do we do that? We can basically take them and then sort we can sort this particular columns, right? In a way that the NAs will be together, right? So how do we do that? I'm going to say sort underscore values like we did earlier, right? And I'm going to give the column name that we're going to sort it by. I want to sort it by 2015 here. And the case that I want to build here is that I want to basically have the NA position first, right? So I'm going to say NA underscore position is equal to be first. So what this does is basically, when it's sorting this data, no matter where the NAs are present or not, it'll basically put all those NAs first so that you can, see them together. So if I run this particular code, you'll see that all the NAs will basically come together, right? And that's one really neat feature where sorting becomes a lot easier with Python Pandas. And a really helpful feature is to be able to group the NAs together either first or last, depending on the kind of business problem you're solving, right? So obviously we are now answering the question of who are the top customers that did not buy in 2015, and that will be these two customers that did not buy in 2015. Moving forward, let's try to get the details of all the customers for a given set of customers, right? So if you're looking at the next question that we are trying to answer, let's basically select this details for all the given set of customers, right? So in this particular case, what we have is we have a set of customers that we want to extract all the columns so that we are able to view the details, right? And the sample customers are provided below, right? Now obviously if you want to select the customers, it's a row wise selection, which means basically we are doing a selection basis on the row here, right? Now obviously many of us can deal with a conditional statement to get the customers here, but we want to really now get it in the construct of Python Pandas basics, right? So let's give it a shot. Now, like we selected the columns using a square bracket, right? Either one column or multiple columns using a list. Like that, we can also select a particular customer using the square bracket notation, right? So I'm going to say customers. I'm going to go back to my original data set, and hey, I'm going to say, hey, give me this particular customer details, right? So if I do that, it's basically going to give me an error, and it's going to give key error. That's expected because while we are doing by default, where we are selecting something by default within square brackets for a data frame, is basically going and looking for this particular name within the columns here, right? So obviously it will not find it because they are present in the rows, right? So definitely there should be a way where we can select it using some other notation, right? And that other notation happens to be the dot loc notation. So if I say dot loc, right, I should be able to select it from rows, right? But if I do that again, you'll see that you'll get an error, and the difference lies in identifying the index for this particular data, right? So what I mean by index is that if I am able to convert a column into index, it basically makes it something like a primary key where this particular data frame has a named column array, but also a named index array, or an array where you can identify each of the row with a particular direct calling name, right? So that happens to be the dot loc, but it's not going to work unless you convert that particular column into an index, right? So how do we convert a particular column into an index? We convert it by using a method called as set index. So by default, the index is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we can test that by saying customers dot head, right, and say run, and you'll see that basically by default you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 as the index, which means if I had to take one customer details from this, if I and let's say that is the first customer that we have here, that is CS2945, it has an index of 0, and if I say dot loc of 0, which means I'm pointing to this particular first customer. So if I run this particular code, you'll see that I get the first customer and its relevant details in this particular format, right? If I change this to 1, I'm basically getting the customer of the second customer's details here, and I'm listing it here, right? Now obviously when we have the customer names such as this, we don't know which is their index, right? So obviously in this case will not be able to select it, right? So the notation that we want to basically use is to basically have that notation with the name, and we'll be able to select it, right? So fortunately we have something called as a dot loc operator which does that. But first, before we do that properties, run that method, we need to set an index to the particular column, which will help us select a set of customers based on that key value there, right? Much like a primary key value in SQL, but obviously in this case we can have repeated values. But the idea here is to basically convert it into an index, which will help us select a certain values in a much more tactical way, right? There are multiple ways to do it. And the easiest way after you imported a particular data frame is like this, right? So you have customers dot and then say set index, right? Open close bracket, and then say give the column name that you want to do it, right? So I'm going to say customer underscore ID as the one that I want to set as index, and if I say set an index, you'll see the index has been set, right? It's gone from having 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 to having the customer ID as an index. Now moving forward, obviously now once we have set the index, right, and now if I just copy the code that we initially ran, this one, I should be able to basically get the details of the customer that we have there, right? So if I run it, you'll see it's not coming, it's giving in an error, and let's see what happens. Why is that particular error coming? If I check it as head again, right, you'll notice we have changed it in the previous step, but it's not changing as we check this particular detail here, right? The reason this does not happen is that in Pandas, right, making a change by default is not an option, right? We have to explicitly make that option callable by the user, right? So in this particular case, I want to introduce you to argument called as in place is equal to true, which means I'm going to take the same thing that I did here, setting the index, but every time you want to make like a permanent change to a data frame, right, you have to explicitly call a argument that is called the in place operator here, right? Say in place is equal to, and then say true, right? So this will tell the pandas set index method that, hey, this particular change that you want to make it permanent in the data set customers, right? If I do that and then check the customers, the head that we have here, you'll see that it's permanently made, right? Now if I want to basically select the customers that I want along the rows, I will be able to do it using the customer name or the ID that we have, right? So I'm just going to copy this customer ID here, paste it. Let me just run this one and run it. It should be .loc, sorry, and I should get the customer details, right? Now obviously we want to get all these customer details. So if I want to add the next customer, if I want all the customers, I want to have them together, right? What I will do is I will put them together in a particular value array here like this, right? So I'm just going to copy this values here and close it by a square bracket, and I'm going to enclose all of these values within a single quotation and then run this code, right? So if I run this code, hey, why is this particular error coming, right? And it will be saying too many indexers that are saying here, right? Which means what we need to do is if you're giving more than one value to be searching and to retrieve that rows, you're basically going to give it in a form of list. That is, you add another square bracket here, give that list of values for which the row should be extracted, right? And for this particular customer, 5 customer IDs, we're going to now extract the details that we require as per the question, right? So the question was obviously in this particular scenario, the question was select the details, all columns for a given set of customers, and we were able to find out the details of a given set of customers, and hence learning the concept of slicing the data set by columns and then extracting information not only for one particular value but for multiple values as well, right? So this was the concept of selecting multiple rows using the .loc parameters, and the same is possible obviously by giving the index numbers. Okay, so moving on, now the next question that we have is selecting 2015 transaction amount and the number of transactions for the same customers, right? So we're going to basically learn selecting multiple columns and rows using the .loc parameter in this particular scenario. And what we have individually learned so far is how do we select columns, multiple columns, how do we slice single rows and select multiple rows, right? But we can combine these two things together and then also get the details, right? So how do we do that is the next question, that is selecting 2015 transaction amount and number of transactions for the same customers, right? So this is what we are going to be doing in this particular problem statement. Okay, where is the problem statement? Yeah, here's the problem statement, right? And the output that we are going to basically look at is this, right? So how do we do that? So to select multiple columns and rows and to answer this particular question, what we're going to do is we're going to begin by taking the number of rows, right? So that's going to be very straightforward because for the same set of customers, I want the details as of now. So this is the details that we have, but hey, I want 2015 transaction amount and the number of transaction, right? So how do we do that? While we use the .loc operator, right? While we select the rows in this particular case, this .loc method can also help me select the columns that I want, right? And this can be done by giving another list to this particular notation here, and that list will basically contain the column names, right? And the first list is obviously the rows, and then the second list is going to be the column names, right? So we want the tran amount along with the number of transactions. So I'm going to say 2015 comma, I want a transaction amount, right? So that's this particular case here. So I'm going to say transactions, that's going to be 2015, right? So basically I just want these customer details and these two columns, right? If I run this, you'll see I basically get these details, right? It's kind of like basically, sorting the data in 2015 largest to smallest, right? And then basically I taking these columns together, right? This one and this one together. If I copy it and then paste it here, you'll see that I basically got a subset of a data set which is giving the top 5 customers with their transaction amount and transactions, right? So it's kind of that subset that we are creating within Pandas data frame, right? With Excel, it's obviously you select and copy paste it. That makes it easy, but with Pandas, this is how you do the same details, right? Now, obviously, like all things, we need to just have a closed loop and query on this particular thing, and that is basically erasing the index, right? Maybe there is some other index that you want to set, and how do you reset the index is basically you say customer dot reset index, and then if you want to make the change permanent, you're going to say in place is equal to true, which will reset the index, right? Which means if I had to rerun this particular code, right, it will no longer give me the results because we have reset the index, and now by default, right, the index is going to be again the column, the row names that we have there, right? The default, that is the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.